New Hope family? Welcome to episode 12 of the show with no name, the final episode of Romans.
Yep.
The end of Romans.
The end.
With me, as always, is Pastor Leo. Oh, I'm David. I don't think I did. We're like immediately distracted. Usually we wait at least 50 to 20 seconds before we distract ourselves. Not this week.
No.
My name's David. I'm very glad that you're here with us today. Pastor Leo is with me as always. Hello,
Hello,
Pastor
everyone.
Leo.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. Is Valentine's Day a thing in the Philippines?
Big thing.
Okay.
In the Philippines, the malls are usually packed with lovebirds, ants crawling all over the place because of the sweetness.
Do you have, the like chalky Valentine's hearts?
No, we go straight to the chocolate.
I mean, obviously that's a big thing here too, but just the little boxes of the Valentine's hearts where the yellow ones are banana and the white ones are wintergreen. Those were the best, but that you can throw away all the other flavors. I just need the banana and the wintergreen ones.
I don't think we have those.
You'll probably hate them because I'm sure they are only something I love because I had them as a child.
Most probably, but yeah, it's that's the time when there's lots of people. What they usually do is they go on dates and then they go to restaurants. It's not much chocolate. It's more for flowers and stuffed animals is what's more popular.
Very similar to stuff here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it the same kind of chocolate? Like, is Reese's and Reese's Hearts?
Depends
and,
if you can afford it, because those ones in the Philippines are
really
a bit
expensive?
more pricey. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
Well,
we
like
go
the
with
cheap Filipino chocolate when you live
Surges
there.
or those knockoff brands
Okay.
that I forgot the names of. It's just
Well, but that's like Reese's is not expensive here,
Right.
But like if we want like European chocolate, like that's going to be super expensive. So it's just funny to hear that Reese's is the expensive. But that when Joanna and I went to Australia last, what would it have been? 2016 or something like that, I think. Yeah, 2016, and we got pizza. And like their pizza's a little different there. Like it's similar, but there's just like it's hard to explain, but it's just slightly different. But then the really, really expensive pizza is Little Caesars.
Oh.
Which at the time was still like $5. Like every large pizza in the United States, every large pizza $5.
Right.
Like it's the cheap option here. But that was like the only like true American style pizza. Like that actually got their ingredients not from Australia. They were shipped over, and so. Like crazy expensive to go get pizza at Little Caesars. I was like, what? Because they have Pizza Hut, but it's different. Like it tastes different than our Pizza Hut.
That's true too in the Philippines.
Pizza's different.
Like Pizza Hut is a big brand in the Philippines. Like chocolate wise, going back to chocolate, anything
I'll always go back
Cadbury
to chocolate.
is a little on the pricey side already. So,
Yep.
I think. They even have Andy and I went there once. I'm not sure if they're still open. I'm not sure if they're still there. There's a place, a Pizza Hut place in Makati, which is more of the business district side of Manila.
Okay.
And it's like a fine dining restaurant. But it's Pizza Hut.
How dare you? Pizza Hut is always a fine dining restaurant. In the 90s it was.
It's like you feel like you have to use a fork and a knife when you're eating pizza in that place because it's fine. It's a cafe, I think, is what they call it. Was it?
That's fascinating.
Or is it Pizza Hut Bistro?
Oh, it's a bistro.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
It's crazy. It was crazy. We went there. We just thought it was a Pizza Hut.
Yeah.
Just eat pizza.
Does it taste like American Pizza Hut?
It does.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It does.
I love that.
I don't like Pizza Hut anymore.
Interesting. Yeah. Cadbury is one that always hits in my brain because Cadbury in Australia is completely different chocolate than the Cadbury you could just go to like the grocery store here and buy. And I think in Europe it's the same thing. Like it's totally different, and it makes me sad because I love Cadbury in Australia, and I don't really like it here very much. It's a like super popular brand there. Like
it is too in the Philippines.
Yeah, there's obviously they don't have Hershey's. There's nothing
Right.
really Hershey's there, so Cadbury is massive there.
Mhm.
Well, the Philippines is close to Australia. Next time I'm in Australia, I'm just gonna
Yeah. It's just
swim,
like
I'm
Paul.
gonna swim over.
Right.
Just
Take a quick jaunter
Yeah.
over to the Philippines.
I would love to visit the Philippines. It just seems too hot and humid for me. Now. I don't. That's just not a good fit for me.
I mean, we can go to that place, Baguio.
Oh yeah,
Right.
what you said is full of the tourists because
Right.
the weather's way better there.
Yes, we can go there.
All right, that works for me. We'll
If
go there.
anybody would be willing to sponsor plane
Yeah.
tickets to have a
That is
podcast
a way.
episode.
Last week, if you joined us last week as we wrapped up chapter 15, we talked about ways to support pastors and missionaries. If you would
so
like to
true.
support me and Leo by paying for us to travel to the Philippines, not sure that's the best use of your money, but we would accept it happily.
we would not say no.
Yeah, correct. Well, happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Do you go big for Valentine's with Andy or?
I go bigger when for our anniversary.
Okay.
I go big, but
We don't really do much for Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
We kind of just came to an agreement early in our marriage that just like, we don't need to. And I know everybody listening right now is just like, well, he agreed to that, but you can go ask Joanna. Okay, and it's not like I do nothing. It's just we don't make a big production out of Valentine's Day. And now with the kiddos, we're like more focused on like making sure we get them like a fun Valentine from us and that kind of thing.
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
I didn't think about, you have kids and they start going to school and now we have to buy Valentines for them to give to everyone in their class. Just like, what a scam all of this is. All right, enough of me being a grouch. Whatever the Grinch version of Valentine's is, that's definitely what I am. I am.
Instead of green, he's pink.
Yeah, well, I know, but I need to be. Well, I guess green is a Christmas color, so yeah, I guess I'm just pink and cranky and trying to ruin Valentine's Day for everybody on the show with no name. Why don't we jump into Romans?
Yes.
It's our last chapter.
It is.
And I have a similar question that I asked last week, but I'll wait to get to that until after your summary.
Okay.
So if you could give us your little summary, what should we be learning here in Romans 16?
All right, so in this chapter, Paul greeted at least 26 people by name, 2 unnamed saints, several churches that were meeting in homes, 4 calling birds, 3 French hens,
Do you think he forgot
2 turtle
the
doves.
2 unnamed saints' names?
Yeah.
Like, I'm really bad at names. So if I were writing chapter 16, like verse 3 would be greet Priscilla and her husband, and greet my dear friend who was the first convert. The guy who was the first convert.
Right,
like,
right.
Like, I'll remember everything about him. So do you think that's why they're unnamed?
could be.
That's what I
I think he
I'm trying to
spent
feel better about
5
myself.
minutes with his quill. Pause. It's like, what was his name?
He snapped it in half and plucked another one out of a bird. And, oh, man.
It's like,
And then
okay, fine. I'm just writing unnamed.
And he closes his letter referencing some people as well, right?
Yep, he greets 9 believers who were with him when he wrote this letter. That's
cool.
Why is it important? Well, it shows that Paul didn't just win souls. That was not just his target. He also won friends. Not cool. Very friendly guy, even though sounds like he's a very cranky person at times.
I feel like he got friendlier once he stopped helping people murder Christians.
That's so true.
Seems like a nicer guy at this point
got
than
a lot
the
nicer.
first time we interact with Paul.
Right. So Paul knew the importance of surrounding ourselves with the right kind of people, and that's what he did. He surrounded himself with people who were a help to him personally and to his ministry. Now, it doesn't mean that we isolate ourselves from the rest of the world. Like when we say, make friends with people who will be able to support you or be Christians like you or something like that, doesn't mean that we isolate ourselves from the rest of the world. Doesn't mean we live on an island and then put a wall around us. We do need to multiply ourselves through the lives of our friends and associates in the ministry. So we are sheep, and so sheep flock together. It's just natural.
Well, let's start with the first 16 verses, which are just kind of all of these greetings. Excuse me. Maybe we're not gonna. I mean, a lot of these people we don't know anything other than this about, like, so we're not gonna spend a ton of time talking about every single person.
Right.
But yeah, let's just kind of talk about some of the people Paul's mentioning here.
Yep. Paul begins with a woman named Phoebe who likes to talk about smelly cats.
I was just gonna start singing "Smelly Cat."
Smelly cat, smelly cat. But yeah, not the one from Friends.
Oh, a different one.
Yeah, different
Okay.
one. Okay, so the word Paul used to describe Phoebe is diakonos, which is where we get the modern day word deacon. And so Phoebe was basically a deaconess in the church. Phoebe and the other women in the first century churches served by doing a lot of things like visiting the sick, assisting other young women, and helping the poor. So Paul confessed that Phoebe had been a helper of himself and other Christians, and he encouraged the church to care for her. Now here's the thing. Paul also uses the word prostatis in the next verse to describe Phoebe. Prostatis literally means a female guardian and a protectress. She's not just helping out, she's also a fierce protector. That's awesome.
That's pretty
Think
sweet.
about that, right? So someone who cares for the affairs of others and aids them with their resources. So she's not just like she helps, but Paul describes her. She's the protectress of the church. So,
and before, I know you're going to mention Priscilla and Aquila here in a second, but the first two people Paul mentions are women.
Yes,
which is so contrarian to this time in human history, and I know a lot of the time people get caught up on some of the things Paul wrote because they don't understand the context and misunderstand like why he's saying certain things about gender roles and about women. Like, don't gloss over and not recognize what Paul is doing here by the first person he mentions is Phoebe.
Yep.
And then how he speaks of her. It's not like, Phoebe, she'll just do whatever you say because she's a woman and she'll like, no. Phoebe's like, she's a deacon. She's like one of the main leaders of the church. And then he uses the other word that I forgot already, prostatis. Like, she's this like powerful protector and guardian, and like that's important. And then the very next person he mentions is Priscilla and Aquila, this couple, but he doesn't mention the man first. Yeah. He mentions the woman first. And like, Paul's not an idiot. Like, he knows what he's doing, and he's aware that in the culture at this time, women were very much viewed as less than. But Jesus obviously didn't view them that way. Yep. And Paul is continuing, like the early church is establishing women as leaders immediately.
Yep.
And
he's recognizing the women and their role in his ministry.
That's good whenever, but like this is why we talk about historical context being important all the time. In the Roman Empire at this time, women had zero power, and in Jerusalem it would have been the same thing. Zero power, and so for them to be viewed as these leaders and to be called out specifically by Paul is such a just massive thing.
It's not just him saying, "Oh, greet her." He's giving them, these women, that honor.
Yeah.
Like when somebody's reading this in the church, it's like, whoa. It's like putting the spotlight on these people.
Yep.
So Priscilla and Aquila, we can read more about them in Acts 18. And then he mentions Andronicus and, I don't know, Junia?
Andronicus.
Sounds
like a Star Trek character.
I know, right?
The Andronicus Galaxy. Like, oh, okay.
Such a cool name.
Anyway. And Priscilla and Aquila, like, of course they got married. Their names rhyme. Like, that seems like a requirement.
Of course.
But yeah, Andronicus. Sorry.
Andronicus. In verse 7, they're referred to as kinsmen by Paul, which can mean anything as close to him as blood relatives, or maybe he's using kinsmen, just saying that they're fellow Jews. We don't know. We're not sure. But he uses kinsmen. So it can be relatives. It can be just fellow Jews, because there were also Gentiles there, but it's just them too. So
in that same verse, verse 12, he refers to them as apostles.
Yes.
So sometimes people see that and then they wonder, well, had they become like a part of the 12? Like, were they a part of the 12 apostles?
Well, no, not really. Paul uses the Greek word apostolos. Yeah, that's true. That's where we got the word apostles. But it does not necessarily mean when he uses apostolos that it's automatically one of the 12.
Sure.
So Paul uses the same word to describe Barnabas and Timothy and Silvanus, which sounds like a weird name. Sounds like an elf.
There's a lot of weird names.
Lord of
the
the Rings.
Rings. Yeah, it does sound Lord of the Ringsian.
Very
yes.
Sylvanus.
Yep.
But okay, so in this case, Paul uses apostolos when he talks about Barnabas and Timothy and Silvanus, and this time those other people that he mentioned to tell the church in Rome that Andronicus and Junia were important Christian teachers. They were messengers. That's what apostolos means. They're messengers. They're teachers. Just like Barney and Tim and Sylvie.
Oh my word!
It's too long. I can't say Sylvanus all the time. So you got Barney and Tim and Sylvie. So
Sure.
So again, Paul's grocery list of people in verses 1 to 16 shows the parts that many people played in Paul's ministry. Think about it. These people are mentioned because they played an important part in Paul's ministry. Many people think Paul did it on his own. Like even the cartoons, when we were watching about Paul's life, it's just sometimes he was just with Timothy or with Barnabas, and it's just the two of them traveling.
Right.
But that is not the case. It's on all of these people's shoulders that the churches today are standing on. It's not just Paul. It's not just Barnabas. It's not just Apollos. It's not just the 12. It's all of these people and all the others that are not mentioned that the churches today stand on. So the question is, what about us? What about us? What about you? What about me? Many years from today, will Christians say the same about us? We may be unnamed. We may even be unnamed. But and we may not even be a Paul, but we can be an Andy or a Junie or a Barney or a Timmy or a Sylvie.
Yeah.
kind of people, right? So are our actions making a lasting impact in the kingdom? And we're not talking about the New Hope Kingdom or the PH Kingdom.
The New Hope Kingdom.
Right? We're talking about God's kingdom. Are we making a lasting impact in God's kingdom? Or are all of those moments going to be lost in time, like tears in rain?
Wow.
Time to die.
I think it's cool too, like an important reminder for us as well, to just see like Paul's taking the time to mention these people. Like he doesn't want to be like, oh, Paul did all of this and he did it all by himself. He's intentionally making sure to highlight those who, like they're lesser than him in our outside view of all of this, right?
That's true.
Like well, Paul's the big one. He's the one who wrote Romans, right? He just mentions that, but it's so important to him, their involvement, that he makes sure that he's mentioning them.
Yep.
And I think that's, for those of us who, you might end up in that position of Paul, like obviously, probably in a smaller scale, but all of us, no matter how high or low we are in the scheme of things, we have people like, I don't want to use the nicknames that you're using, but like Barney and Tim. And so like we have those people in our lives too. And like Paul's giving us the example of like, it's important to recognize them. Like even if what they did to other people might seem minuscule compared to what you're doing, like that's important. And it's important that like you recognize that you're not doing it alone too. So I think that's cool. But then we get to verse 17. It's, speaking of people he doesn't mention by name, but I kind of wish he did.
I know.
These would have been the
These
best.
are the
if he's
ones.
like, all right, let's talk about Leo here for a few verses. Because like clearly not everybody was on the same team here.
That's true. Paul mentions them over there.
his chapter of just loving everyone and he has to just
Right.
But I'm really mad at these people because verse 17 through 20 he really gets
I
after
imagine
it
if
here.
you're one of those, and then the church starts looking at you, like,
Right.
Then they mention them.
Well,
it's
yeah,
like,
they're going through the list. They're, Philogius, Julia, Olympus, and you're like, oh, I wonder when he's gonna get to me. He hasn't mentioned me yet. And then watch out for those who cause divisions, and all the heads turn at you.
Right.
You're like, oh no, he did mention me.
It's so cool. He's very intentional in what he's doing, and he doesn't hold back.
Nope.
So yeah, so these people, for selfish reasons, were dividing the churches by teaching false doctrine. So it's possible that they were the same people who caused trouble in other churches. Important thing is, instead of preaching the truth, they spread their own religious propagandas using deceit and clever speeches to sway people to join them. So we have the same problem today. Unfortunately, nothing has changed 2,000 years later. And us Christians must beware of these false teachers. And we're not going to name them too. It's just beware of those people. So, yeah. Paul's instructions are to the church in Rome are still applicable today. For the false teachers, identify them, and there are a lot. You can search on YouTube if you want. Right? Identify them and avoid them.
Yeah. And then, he calms back down in verse 21. And we get back to the good stuff. And he starts with Timothy, a familiar character.
We see here just how many people really or Paul really relied on.
Right.
To keep his ministry going. Again, if you watch TV shows or cartoons about Paul, you'll see him and with just one or two, but it's not the truth. It's Timothy, of course, is there, but we also have a scribe who was there with him that time, and people who took Paul in. In this case, right now, it's at the time of this writing, it was Gaius. Probably when he was somewhere else, it was some other person. So this same home where Gaius lived is where believers met and had fellowship with one another. So, quick side note when it comes to that. Even though we're very, very familiar with the idea of meeting every Sunday for church in a church building, especially here in the U.S. or back in the Philippines, we have to remember that even today, in many parts of the world, there are still places where people can't do the same thing. They too, even today, still have to meet in a small room of a house. Even today, they have to meet in secret in many places or risk being persecuted, even losing their lives. Even today, we need to see and realize just how blessed we are.
For sure.
Think about that. We get to worship freely here. In many parts of the world, that's not the case. We take for granted so much, while so many believers in other countries and communities see what we take for granted as a luxury. Which begs the question, if your regular Christianity is going to church every Sunday and nothing more kind of person were put in a place or country like that, if these kind of people like, I'm just going to go to church and that's me being a Christian, ta-da, and then you put them in a place like that where just being found out that you're a Christian means that you could lose your life, would they still be Christian? I don't know. It's a good question to think about.
Yeah. I mean, even for those of us that are like more involved, like it's impossible for us to know, right? Because we thankfully have been blessed by not having to make that decision. Maybe we have some people listening that do, but yeah, that's just a totally different thing. And even though we might not be able to answer that question 100% because we're not in that situation, like you think, like you think of Peter, right, with Jesus before he's betrayed.
Oh yeah,
and
like, I'm never gonna be.
I would do anything, and I mean, and even he cuts the servant's ear off, like he's out, and then the second Jesus gets arrested, it's like, okay, it's betrayal time. Like I'm gonna deny him, deny.
Time to run.
And we like to make fun of Peter for that, but like Peter certainly didn't think he
Yep.
was ever going to be that person.
Yep.
He was Jesus' best buddy. Like he hung around him all the time. And so we might not be capable of knowing how we would do in that situation, and hopefully we never have to find that out. But we can be intentional about like making sure we are more invested than like what you were just talking about.
That's
of
true.
Just like, you know, I mean, I already mentioned it, but the series we've just wrapped up at New Hope, where it was called Be the Church, which is terminology we use a lot around New Hope. And we went through like Go, Grow, Give, and just the importance. And you guys did a similar series.
It's on habits, and then this time after habits, we're going through being selfless. So it's basically that.
Yeah, I think it's just a lot of good reminders that we need to embrace the like luxuries that you just called them, right? Someone that's in a situation where they don't have the freedoms that we have, see them as luxuries, embrace those, and then fully invest, right? Like what more can I do? What other ways can I serve? What other ways can I give? What other ways can I grow? How can I get more involved?
I mean, think about it. You if you get to worship in a church where the seats are comfortable, that is a privilege, not a luxury. We're privileged to sit there, but in many parts of the world, they don't even get to sit in seats. Some of them, and I've seen pictures of this, like they're worshiping in a church in the middle of a flood, like with water up to their knees, standing up. Because once you sit down, well, then you're half of your body is submerged. So that kind of thing. There are places where, and I know because Andy's sister is in the Middle East, and she's talking about how they worship, and it's a lot different from worshiping in where we are, and even something as simple as getting to worship in a place where there's air conditioning.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a church in Reynosa, Mexico that I visited 3 different times in high school and college, and did different projects there. But the first time I went, I think it was when I was in 10th grade, and it was a church of like 8,000 to 10,000 people. It had grown like crazy, and they didn't have anywhere for all these people, and so they had built this huge concrete slab that would one day become their church. But by the time I first went there, they had like the like main pillars like to build their roof, and then the steel beams, but only one corner of the church actually had roofing.
Wow.
And one of the services that I was there for, it started pouring rain.
Oh,
and literally everyone went and huddled in the one quarter of the church where you were partially protected from the rain, and just continued on with the service.
Yeah.
Because they're like, we're at church, and it was Mexico. It was 1,000,000 degrees outside. It was the middle of summer. There's no air conditioning.
Right.
And then the next time I went, they had finished the roof, but no walls. And like and that's not, they weren't like being persecuted for their faith, but they still just had none of the luxuries that I had grown accustomed to at church. They don't have the good coffee today at church.
Right.
Where like they're out of donuts by second service. This is outrageous.
The coffee shop is closed.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean we're like bad for having those things, but we are bad if we like fail to recognize and be grateful for the ridiculous luxuries that we have, and the benefits that we have because of where we happen to live or happen to go to church.
That's true.
So I think, those are good things for us to remember. We get to verse 25, just to move us on here a little bit, Leo.
Yep.
Or before we just keep ranting about things. He brings up a mystery again.
A mystery.
We had a mystery in chapter 11. This is where we would insert the Indiana Jones music if we could afford it, but we cannot, so we're not going to do that. But if you're watching on like your computer and you have your phone nearby, just go to YouTube real quick. Indiana Jones theme song, press play while Leo talks about this. But is this the same mystery? Do we have a new mystery? Is there a map on the back of the Declaration of Independence? Nicolas Cage needs to know.
National treasure.
Yes, thank you.
I love that movie.
It's a great movie.
It
really
great.
is.
It's like Indiana Jones.
If Nicolas Cage was in it.
But it's basically the same thing. It is God's work to unite believing Jews and Gentiles in one body, which is called today the church. So this was Paul's special message that he took with him everywhere he went. That's the message. It's the message that Paul brought with him. Because of this message that that Jesus is all about uniting the Jews and the Gentiles. His fellow Jews persecuted Paul because they wanted to maintain their Jewish privileges.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Like we talked about last week, where he was saying the Gentiles that he was bringing this gift from were so happy to give it because they were inheriting the Jewish spiritual privileges, so they wanted to share their material privileges. The Jewish people that weren't following Christ did not have any interest in sharing their spiritual privileges with the Gentiles.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's it's the same thing, but Paul's message remains the same. Like, Jesus is all about uniting Jews and Gentiles. So here's the bottom line for
the whole book.
The whole book.
Oh man.
Yeah. So Paul wrote this letter to explain God's plan of salvation to Christians, and not just the Jewish Christians. We're talking about all Christians. So we would be established and share the truth with the lost. So our hope and prayer, and it's not just me and David, our hope and prayer, like all the Christians, our hope and prayer is that our deep dive through Paul's letter to the letter to the Romans, to the church in Rome, will make us more stable in our faith in God. Our prayer is that this helps you deepen your faith, that this helps you understand the message that Paul brought with him, because it stands even today, and we hope and pray that this makes you more excited to share Jesus with other people.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's not just something that we always talk about because we're in church, but it's really something. If it's really good news, again, we talked about this so many times already. If it's really that much of a good news, why are we not going crazy spreading this good news to others?
Questions for us today, Pastor Leo?
Questions? Here we go. Number 1. Who do you need to tell today that you're grateful for them?
I'm grateful for you, Leo.
I'm grateful for you too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Does that count? Do we have to still do this question, or
nope.
Are we good?
Answer that one. We're good with that one.
You
How
have
about
to figure
you?
it out.
Just kidding. All right, number 2. Whose obedience to God encourages you?
That's a cool one.
That's awesome, right? Think about it. Whose obedience to God encourages you? But other than that, how does it motivate you to pursue obedience yourself? Don't just say, "Oh, I admire their obedience," and then just sit there doing nothing. If you admire their obedience, what are you doing to pursue obedience yourself? And the last one is, what can you do to serve your local church? And who can you commend for their service?
That's good. Well, we did it.
We did it.
We made it through Romans.
We're done.
It's about 34 episodes, 35 episodes, somewhere along those lines.
Yeah,
about 35 episodes. That's pretty good.
It was.
Your teaching was awesome, and I know I really appreciated it. I know a lot of other people have really appreciated it as well. It's big announcement time. Can you give me a drum roll, Pastor Leo? That was okay. You've done better.
Yeah.
I'm
not a good drummer.
You're a singer, not a drummer. We are going to the next book that we're going to be studying is in fact Judges.
Not the Gospel of Thomas.
We are going. Oh boy. Not Daniel and the Dragon from the Apocrypha. We have talked about like how fun it would be to do like an apocryphal book and the intrigue there. Pastor Mike and I, when he was still the lead pastor here, when we were going all the way through the Bible in a year on the Grow podcast, we did spend an episode on the time in between the Old Testament and the New Testament when a lot of those apocryphal books were written, and that was an interesting episode. I would have loved to have spent. So maybe one day we'll do that. But for now, we're going to do Judges.
We're
going to spend 55 weeks just on Ehud. We're not even going to read the rest of the book.
It's a forensic analysis.
Have you ever seen like, it's gonna be a cross of like Mythbusters, and there used to be the show called Deadliest Warrior. Did you ever watch that show?
Oh, yes.
And they would try to figure out like, was the ninja or like the Native American Apache like a more deadly warrior, and they'd like test their weapons on like ballistic dummies. We're gonna do all of that to figure out how this fat
We're gonna
king
test
got
the dagger
stabbed.
to see how.
It's gonna be great.
Yeah,
we're not gonna do any of that actually, but we are gonna study Judges. And I hope you got the sarcasm there.
We don't have the money.
We're gonna study Judges, but it's not gonna be as like deep of a dive. I mean, it's still gonna be a deep dive on Judges, but it won't feel exactly the same as Romans.
Yeah, because it's the book of Judges there's a different reason why it was written. This one, the letter to the Romans was more theological. That's why we needed to really deep dive into it and take it slowly, because it's just like eating meat. If you bite too much of it, you're gonna choke. So it's we really had to take it slow. But Judges is more of description of what happened during that time. So we're not going to take it.
And we'll get into that in Judges. We'll be talking a lot about like, why is this important? Why does this need to be in the Bible? Like, how does this help me grow in my relationship with Jesus? That's like, which I'm very excited for those type of conversations, because I love, like, I'm a history nerd. We've talked about that plenty. So I love the like nerdy historical side of it, and just the study of this ancient culture and this ancient time. But even more importantly is how, like, why is it there? Why did God include this? And why is it helpful to me in my growth? So, but there'll be longer reads. Like, we're not going to do 10 verses at a time.
Yes.
So it's a little more on you
to
keep up
longer,
with us.
Yeah.
So the first one. So for next week, Judges 1, all the way through Judges 3 verse 6.
Yes.
So 6 verses into chapter 3. Now it's not like Psalm 127, or is that right? That's
No.
It's not like 975 verses, but it is longer than we've been doing.
It's 974.
Yeah, it's way shorter. So set a little extra time aside to make sure you're reading along with us. But it might be good to don't do this if you listen while you drive or something, but have your Bible next to you as you're listening to the episodes
audio.
And that's a great way to get it read. I just mean, when you're listening to the podcast next week, have your Bible there, because you might not. Right now, when you're reading 10 verses, you can probably remember all 10 of the verses you read.
Oh, yes.
But you're not going to remember every single thing from Judges 1 through Judges 3 verse 6 probably next week, unless you. I mean, that's props to you if you do. That's pretty cool. So just read along, and then we'll be intentional about how we talk about it as well, understanding that it's going to be different. You have a suggestion for everybody as well.
I do have a suggestion,
and there's going to be a link to this suggestion in the YouTube description or in the podcast notes if you listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
There is a great video that a group called the Bible Project made on the book of Judges. It gives you a great overview of what it's about.
Yep.
And so I suggest you watch it.
Yep. Great way
Go
to start.
watch it, just so you have an idea what it's all about, why the book of Judges was written, and the overarching theme that they have over it. So the link will be in the suggestions.
In fact, we're going to add that to your homework for next week.
Oh yeah,
but
there you go.
It's only like 10%. So if you skip that part of your homework, but you get the reading done, you still get an A. You'll be fine.
You'll be fine.
Yeah, you'll be fine. But it definitely will be beneficial.
It helps.
So we encourage it.
Yes.
Like, an A is nice, but an A plus, even better. So encourage you to read along with us. Thank you for those of you who just have been with us all through the book of Romans. It was really cool. I hope you learned as much as I did.
For those of you who were here from the start until now, this is for you.
Yeah. Golf claps for everybody. Golf claps for everybody. And when I know I say it every single week, but I say it because I mean it. We really love you, and we're so thankful for you. We're thankful that you're wanting to take a next step in your relationship with Jesus by growing throughout the week and listening to this podcast and diving deep into God's Word. It's just such an important thing for all of us.
It is.
And this podcast is a huge benefit to me in that way as well. So thank you, Leo. Thanks to all of you. We love you, and we will see you next time in Judges.
Ingat.